if we're talking about God's work in salvation, we are able to see the effect of a new birth that God has done, the work of God, even though it's something that we don't see, and even though it's not something that man can control or anything like that. When a new birth happens, and when a spirit is revived and the spirit is renewed, you see the effects of it. And when you see the effects of it, you see and understand that the work is totally of the Lord. Okay, Jesus is going to even hint to that fact a little bit later in the passage. Again, we're going to look at that next time. But when you see a change like that, you come to understand that the change that has happened, the birth that has taken place, has been something that has been done by God himself, which is why we need to understand what we're talking about, what we're saying when we use some of these terms. This is what I'm talking about where I come full circle. Because again, if we consider the fact that we say things like, that person is born again, okay? Now let's assume that a problem that I've mentioned happens, unfortunately, more than once, where somebody says all you need to do to become a Christian is to pray a prayer. Even if they really don't understand what they're praying or even what they're accepting, in a lot of people's minds, you say the prayer and they're in. And let me just say again, that's not to say that everybody who prays the prayer is not saved. It's not to, people who have prayed the prayer, there are some people who do genuinely pray it and mean it, and they know what they're asking the Lord of and everything. But with the way that modern day evangelism is going on now, there's a lot of cases where people are told to pray a prayer. They don't understand what they're praying, and they just, in their mind, they're just saying, okay, I repeat these words and I guess I'm in. And so, and by the way, when we think along these lines in a big picture sort of way, if there's anything that we think about as far as the work of God in salvation, we usually think about it only and exclusively as it relates to Jesus' work on the cross. Now, is that a big factor? Absolutely. Absolutely it is. That is part of God's work in salvation, of what Jesus Christ did 2,000 years ago. But beyond that, I don't think a lot of Christians give a lot of thought to the work of God that continues to happen even after the cross. When somebody comes into saving faith, something supernatural happens. There is a new birth that takes place. There is a new creature. If we understand that that is what goes into somebody who is born again, spiritual life or life didn't exist, we should ideally see the effects of that. So if we take the person who just prayed a prayer just because they were told to, and then we look and we see that there really isn't any difference in them now than before they prayed the prayer. Now, granted, we're not expecting perfection out of everybody. No, that's not true of anybody. But if we're looking at somebody who looks no different now than they did before, shouldn't we bring to question whether that person really came to true saving faith? Some people will say, no, it's not proper to ask that question because they prayed the prayer. But there's no change. But yet, they will say that person was born again. And that doesn't make sense. Do you see what I'm saying? So we use the terms, and we kind of narrowed it down to born again means being a Christian. Yes, if you are born again, you are a Christian, but it means much more than that. And if we don't understand what we're saying, we might find ourselves saying things that are contradictory. Somebody who hasn't found true saving faith, but we think they have because they prayed a prayer, they look no different, they act like an unbeliever, they talk like an unbeliever, they have no interest in the God or the things of God, and yet we say that person is born again. You see the confusion there? That's a problem. So hopefully, as we continue to look at Jesus' words, and even what we've looked at already, we have a greater understanding of what Jesus is even trying to communicate when he uses that term.